The transport pod hit the atmosphere of Kareth 9 like a stone thrown into a furnace. Inside the observation deck of the Galactic Survival Academy, 300 alien students pressed their faces against the viewport glass, watching the tiny capsule streak orange fire across the violet sky below. Most of them had already completed their own survival trials on carefully selected Class 2 or Class 3 worlds, temperate climates, minimal predators, pre-packed emergency rations allowed. Nobody had ever attempted a trial on a Class 7. Nobody sane, anyway. Instructor Kale Veyron stood at the center console, his four-fingered hands moving across the monitoring panel with practiced calm. His species, the Veltharn, were known across the galaxy for their composure. Cold-blooded in more ways than one. But even Kale felt something tighten in the membranes behind his eyes as he watched the biometric feed from the pod's passenger. Heart rate, 72 beats per minute. Kale checked the reading twice. Then a third time. 72. The pod was currently experiencing 11 gs of re-entry force while plunging toward a planet with an atmospheric oxygen content that would induce hypoxia in most species, surface temperatures that swung between -40 and +60 degrees Celsius depending on the time of day, megafauna that had wiped out 2 separate colonization attempts, and flora that had evolved chemical defenses potent enough to dissolve titanium composite armor. And the human's heart rate was 72 beats per minute. Instructor Veyron, said a young Dendrak student beside him, her bioluminescent frills flickering with anxiety, is the subject aware of where he is going? He proposed the location himself, Kale said. The frills went dark. Ethan Cross hit the ground running, literally. The pod had been designed for a soft landing. Kareth 9 had other ideas. A thermal updraft caught the capsule 300 meters above a canopy of razor leaf trees and flipped it sideways. The pod bounced off a ridge, shed its landing struts, and came to rest upside down in a riverbed of black volcanic sand. Ethan was out of the crumpled hatch before the emergency beacon finished its boot sequence. He stood up, stretched his back, and looked around. Okay, he thought. Okay. This is fine. The sky above was a bruised greenish-purple, the twin suns of the Kareth system cutting low arcs near the horizon. He had maybe 4 hours of usable daylight. The air tasted metallic thin, with a sharp chemical bite that meant the plant life was already venting its defensive compounds. He pulled his collar up instinctively, then remembered, no equipment. That was the point. The trial rules were simple. Survive for 72 hours on the designated world. No tools. No rations. No shelter kit. No communicator beyond the passive biometric transmitter implanted at his wrist. The Academy would watch. They would not help. Ethan crouched beside the overturned pod and assessed. The crash had sheared off a panel of heat ablative sheeting, dense, rigid, roughly the size of a door. He dragged it free with both hands. It wasn't meant to be a tool. But the edge where it had torn was jagged and work-hardened from re-entry heat. Sharp enough. Item 1, he thought. He found a length of snapped hydraulic cable next. Braided carbon fiber composite. Strong. Flexible. About 4 meters of it. Item 2. He spent the next 40 minutes doing nothing but walking the riverbed and collecting. Smooth stones, he could feel the difference in density by weight, knew which would hold an edge and which would shatter. A cluster of something that looked like mushrooms but smelled like pine resin. He broke one open carefully, smelled it, touched the sap to the back of his hand. Waited. No reaction beyond a mild warmth. Edible. Probably. He'd eaten worse on Earth. He'd eaten worse on a camping trip in the Cascades at age 14, when his Uncle Dave had confidently identified definitely edible berries that turned out to be definitely not edible, and they'd both spent a memorable night beside a river. He ate one mushroom slowly. Waited. Kept moving. In the observation deck, a Veltharn biochemist named Sarah had joined Kale at the console. She was staring at the video feed with her mouth slightly open. He just ate something. Yes. We haven't completed the flora toxicology analysis for Grid 7 yet. We don't know if that's. His digestive system has already begun neutralizing it, Kale said, watching the biometric data. Mild immune response. Contained. He paused. Humans evolved on a Class 4.7 world. Their biology expects chemical interference. It has contingencies. Contingencies, Sarah repeated. Earth has roughly 400,000 species of flowering plants. Approximately 25,000 are toxic to humans in some way. Their ancestors spent millions of years eating wrong things and dying. The ones who survived. Kale gestured at the feed. They retained a rather aggressive talent for not dying. On the screen, Ethan had wedged the heat shield panel between two boulders at an angle and was weaving river reeds across its underside with the hydraulic cable, creating a layered roof. Not a shelter, a lean-to. Crude. Effective. Built in 20 minutes from crash debris and plants he'd never seen before in his life. A student near the back of the observation deck whispered something. Another answered. The word spread in a murmur through 300 alien voices. He's building a house. Night on Kareth 9 fell like a hammer. Temperature dropped 50 degrees in under an hour as the suns vanished. The razor leaf canopy rattled and screamed in the thermal winds. Something large moved in the darkness beyond the riverbed, something that registered on the infrared scanner as roughly 4 meters at the shoulder, with a heat signature that suggested it was warm-blooded, territorial, and aware of Ethan's presence. Ethan had a fire. He'd started it with friction, a dry red spindle, a notched piece of the pod's polymer insulation he'd carved flat with the edge of his improvised tool. It had taken him 11 minutes. The combustion wasn't optimal. The atmosphere's chemical content made the flame blue-green rather than orange. But it burned. He'd built it at the mouth of the lean-to, facing the direction the large creature had come from. He sat behind it, cross-legged, and watched the darkness. He was not afraid. This surprised Instructor Kale more than anything else. The biometrics were clear. Cortisol, normal. Adrenaline, slightly elevated, but controlled. The human's amygdala was active but not dominant. He was alert. Focused. Processing. The creature approached to within 30 meters, drawn by curiosity or territorial instinct. Its eyes, 12 of them, arranged in a crown around its skull, reflected the green firelight. Ethan picked up a stone. Not to throw. Just to hold. He looked at the creature. The creature looked at him. He made himself big, stood up slowly, squared his shoulders, and exhaled a long, controlled breath through his nose. A display behavior. A territorial signal. I am here. I am calm. I am not prey. The creature held its position for 1 minute and 40 seconds. Kale counted. Then it turned and moved back into the dark. 300 students in the observation deck didn't breathe for the entire 1 minute and 40 seconds. 72 hours later, Ethan Cross walked out of the extraction point on his own 2 feet, carrying what could only be described as a bag, woven from plant fiber and hydraulic cable, filled with food he had gathered and, in one memorable moment on hour 47, hunted. He was sunburned. He had a gash on his left forearm that he'd packed with a particular soil compound after testing several options methodically. He was down perhaps 4 kilograms from baseline. He was smiling. Kale met him at the landing pad. They stood looking at each other for a moment, the tall, silver-skinned Veltharn examiner and the stocky, sun-darkened human with dirt under his fingernails and the quiet eyes of someone who'd had a long think and come out the other side of it. You passed, Kale said finally. Did anyone think I wouldn't? Kale considered this. Several of my colleagues filed formal objections to approving the trial location. They argued it was irresponsible. That the Academy could not in good conscience send a student to a Class 7 world without equipment. What did you tell them? I told them, Kale said slowly, that the equipment was not the variable they should be worried about. Ethan looked at him. And that the human was. Ethan nodded once, shouldered his woven bag, and walked past him toward the debrief hall. Kale watched him go. Behind him, through the viewport, Kareth 9 hung in space, violet and deadly and ancient. A world that had killed better prepared species than humanity. It hadn't killed Ethan Cross. It hadn't even particularly inconvenienced him. Kale pulled up the Academy intake records on his datapad and began writing his recommendation for the new course curriculum. He titled it simply, "What Human Survival Actually Means, and Why the Rest of You Should Pay Attention." Humanity, it turned out, didn't conquer the stars. They just made the stars realize they'd been dealing with the wrong species all along.